Hockey, folks. I'm your host, Peter Wojcicki, and if you haven't done so, please go to our website, jablamhockey.com. That's JABLAMHOCKY.com, and please subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or TuneIn or wherever you're getting podcasts. If you want to follow anything hockey, you want to follow myself on Twitter at Russian98. That's RUSSIAN 98. And of course, on Twitter, our actual show, and you get some cool facts with Sean helping us on there at Jablam Hockey on Twitter. Go on there, follow us on Twitter. You can follow us on Facebook, and please subscribe and rate and review us. We're going to be getting mailing lists soon, and if you rate us and you subscribe us and you're in the mailing list, you could win prizes as soon as next week. So please subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes and follow us on our website. All right, what do we have this episode? It's a jam-packed one, folks. We've got Arda Ocal, the amazing Arda Ocal, who is everywhere, it seems, from the Weather Network to wrestling to a lot of different types of hockey. Arda's a fabulous chat to listen to, so please follow up on that. If you're anyone who wants to get into the TV world in any capacity, you should hear what Arda has to say in opening the envelope and making sure you're out there and being in the right place at the right time. It's great chat, and of course we finish up with some hockey talk and of course some esports stuff with Arda. We've also got a Team ISO, and we're going to be talking some Arizona Coyotes with Lewis Pannone, and you listen to all things Coyotes with Lewis and me. We talk about their whole roster, all the crazy transactions and additions to their team in the off season, the Galchenyuk and Domi trade, and of course, if you want to hear about some cool futures with the Coyotes, stay tuned at the end of that chat to hear about some kids coming up for the Coyotes. Time for some trending now. Halloween is coming, and you know what that means in the hockeyverse and Instagram and everything. It means it's time to take a look at all of the crazy things and costumes that these NHL players are wearing. The good thing is we're getting away from some negative ones, but we've still got some ridiculous ones, and McDavid might win it again, you could say. We all know the crazy one that he had last year, looking like Trump. And now some people might say he's still not gotten to any other level in IQ by being Homer Simpson, and his girlfriend is obviously Marge. I don't know about this one, folks. Maybe it takes the cake. Maybe it's the best of the worst. But he looks like a homeless man, maybe, with a weird white shirt. I don't know. If you're a bit older like me and you grew up watching TVO, we're always post our trending now stuff and our images. So all these Halloween images we're going to have on our website, on jablamhockey.com. He reminds me of Parlez-moi. If you remember this show about a homeless, scary-looking clown-type guy who is basically teaching us French. But for me, I don't know about other children, it was really scary-looking. And he kind of a little bit reminded me of that character. So I did not like it. I didn't like the reference to Parlez-moi. Man. Anyways, moving on. Some cool ones. The rest of the Oilers guys look pretty cool with Lucic and those guys. The Halloween one was weird with the Dallas Stars, with Ben and Sagan. And then Radulov looking like a weird Yoshi, because they were all doing the whole Super Mario Kart costume. But he was really one scary-looking Yoshi, that's for sure. And then, of course, Matt Duchene and his wife, and they have their baby reveal costume type thing, which was pretty cool, actually. All right. What else was pretty cool? Korea gets his number 9 retired and raised to the rafters by the Ducks. It's cool to see all the classic old school Ducks, and of course his good old pal Teemu Selanne there. So that was a nice honor and good tradition by the Ducks to do that. It's pretty cool. And I can't remember exactly how the reference went, but Selanne kind of chirped Korea. Maybe it was a little bit about how long he had to take to walk all the way around, which is kind of odd. I don't know why there wasn't a short carpet just to go to the center ice, but it seemed like he almost had to do a Stanley Cup skate around the ice practically to get to the medal. Anyways, that was pretty cool. What's really interesting and it's been going around was Peter Laviolette wearing a bull mask to talk with the media. What? That's so weird, and I don't know. It just also going to old school hockey, it's just so peculiar for a coach to kind of be that colorful, especially a guy like Laviolette, who we've never seen show much color in his any kind of interviews or interaction with the media. But apparently, I guess he made a bet with the players, and they won the first 2 games on a road trip. And the bet was that if they did win those first 2 games, Coach Laviolette has to wear the bull mask when he's talking to the reporters. Yeah. The cool thing was the mask kind of worked with the mouth opening as he was talking. So, pretty cool. And check out Gene Principe's Twitter for that. And the last but not least, the coolest thing on social media, and of course on commercials, was Tim Hortons honoring and bringing over the only team from Kenya that plays hockey to Canada. And they got to play a pretty cool hockey game. And of course, amazingly, Tim Hortons NHL representatives, Sidney Crosby and Nathan McKinnon, joined them on their team to play a regular men's league hockey game in which I guess they scored a goal. They didn't get to show more of that. That would have been pretty cool. But it was really cool that they did that. It's wonderful to see how far hockey reaches in this world. And even better, during the game last week between the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Maple Leafs at Scotiabank Arena, the captain of Kenyan's team, I think his name is pronounced Ben Ajager, he got to go to the game and again shake hands and meet up with Crosby again and some of the players from both teams. So well done, golf clap. Well done, Tim Hortons, and thank you for doing that. Time for on the show, we getting some special guests this year, of course. And on the show today, we have Arda Ocal. He is from the Toronto area, North York, Ontario. So that's great, my area. And he's been everywhere, from The Score to Underground Wrestling to Global TV and also AHL hockey, OHL hockey, Brampton, Toronto Marlies, Weather Network, you name it all. And then he ended up with the WWE. And now he's currently at ESPN and MSG Networks. Am I right, Arda?
Yeah, still doing some work with them. Very happy to be. I live in New York now, but like you said, I grew up in Ontario. I was born in North York General, actually, and I lived there for a couple of years, moved to Scarborough, and then spent most of my life in Oakville. So very proud Toronto boy here.
Perfect. And you have done some work in Brampton, which is where I'm from. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, the Brampton Battalion, Coach Stan Butler, right place, right time. I happened to be in the building and had been putting all this time in, gaining trust, gaining respect of all the superiors there. And so they said, why don't you try your hand at this? So I did, and I impressed them enough that they said, well, let's give you a couple of things to sink your teeth into. So I did a couple of random shows, like there were a couple of bulletin board shows. And then I told them that I really had an interest in sports. So they gave me a bunch of high school tournaments to do, play-by-play and hosting, that kind of thing. And then finally they decided, why don't you fill in on the Brampton Battalion broadcasts?
Yeah.
And so that's where I really got my start with them. And it was a thrill, man. I did that for a few seasons. I started as a fill-in, and then I did regular color, which is very odd because usually a color commentator position would be reserved for either a former player or someone like, in my case, the first thing that I did with them was color. It was a good learning experience from a broadcast standpoint, though, because I really learned about the mechanics of a broadcast, what the play-by-play does, what the color does. And I did hosting there as well, and then I filled in on play-by-play when the late Doug Anderson, may he rest in peace, was not available. So I feel like that was among the best experience that I could have gotten doing sports broadcasting, in particular hockey.
And then where did you transition to after, and how did you get into the Score?
The Score, I volunteered as well. It was in May of 2009. The Score had a hardcore sports radio, Sirius radio station at the time, so that's how I got into the door. I basically cut clips and did a lot of random volunteer, intern type of stuff. And finally, in the fall of 2009, I became a part-time producer. And later that month, I want to say it was in November, there was an email that was sent out. Again, this is a whole right place, right time thing. Mm-hmm. And this is why I tell people all the time, if they have a dream to work at, let's say, ESPN or TSN or something like that, just be in the door. Take any job there, because you might be in a situation similar to this where there was literally an email sent out from the vice president of programming saying, hey, we're looking for new content. If you have any ideas, fill out this one-page form. And I never would have gotten that email if I wasn't volunteering and if I didn't become a part-time producer. So the timing worked out very well for me. And at the time, the Score television network, so that media company had 4 different arms. There was the website, there was the app, there was the television station, and then there was the Sirius radio station. So those were like the 4 arms, right?
Yeah.
And so they were looking for new television programming. And at the time, all with TSN and Rogers and all the other important, I should say most watched rights, were essentially scattered among the 2 giants, and the Score was definitely the third of 3 in terms of national networks, right? Yeah. So they had odds and ends. At one point they had March Madness and Serie A soccer. I think maybe they also had Premier League at one point, but their biggest property on a week-to-week basis by far was WWE.
Yeah.
And so I was a big WWE fan growing up, and one of my lifelong bucket list items at the time was to work for WWE because I grew up idolizing Mean Gene. He was one of my heroes, kind of like Mean Gene and Bob Cole were like the 2 people that I really, I loved their work so much that I would watch broadcasts just for their work or just to emulate them kind of thing. So, excuse me. So I filled out this form and I said, there's sports pre- and post-game shows, Ron McClain and the panel talking about hockey before and after the games. What about for WWE? And my initial idea wasn't to treat it like it was a real sport. It was really to dissect the segments and the matches and the storylines as if you would talking to your friends. Mm-hmm. So that's how I pitched it. And that's exactly what the show was for the first year. It was pulling the curtain back, behind the scenes analysis of the product that you were watching. And so that's essentially, I filled out the form, I sent it back, and then I got an email 20 minutes later saying, go meet in his office to talk about this. Nice. And it began in December of 2009. I was on it until 2013, and it's still on the air today. And so I consider that a big accomplishment in my career anyhow.
And do you come up with the name right after wrestling?
No, that was the vice president of programming's idea. He said right after wrestling, RAW, Raw, right after Raw, essentially. So that was his idea. I can't take credit for that, no.
Nice. Very nice. That's cool. And then you've helped launch many careers as well and people through the doors into wrestling as well with Right After Wrestling, or now as it is called, Aftermath.
I mean, I won't take credit for anybody's career success. I will say that that show would not be as successful without those people on it.
Yeah.
And so, people like Renee and Jimmy and Jackie, like these people were very instrumental in the success of the show. And even today, I mean, Jimmy is still on the show. One of the big reasons I'm so happy that it's still on the air is because Jimmy Corderas is still getting paid. And Jimmy is one of my dearest friends in life. So for him to have something like this that lasted so long, he left WWE in 2009, and we're close to 2019, and he's still in the wrestling space on television doing a great job. So to me, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So that makes me happy.
Yeah, it's an incredible get for the show, as well as having him continue to work on the show. And even you have guys like Santino now that are currently on the show on and off. It's amazing how it's going.
Absolutely. I couldn't be happier that things are going well there. Nug is a great guy as well. Mm-hmm. He's been in comedy for so long, and now he's thriving with the show as well. So put it this way. Everyone on that show deserves a great success, and I'm sure as the weeks go along, as the months go along, you will definitely see that, because they're all great human beings and really good at their jobs.
Yeah. All right, let's continue a little bit about this. Who is Kyle Edwards, and where is he?
Kyle Edwards, I think, is helping orphans in an orphanage in Mexico with El Generico. I think they're working together. Nice. That's last I heard. So the story of the name is, when I got signed by WWE, I kind of knew, I had an idea that my name would be changed, and I was sort of hoping that it wouldn't, but I knew the deal. Like pretty much everyone's name gets changed, especially if you're an announcer. And if you notice, there's sort of a pattern among the announcers where they're very easy to pronounce names, or they're alliterated to, the same letter, first name and last name, or it's two first names, Josh Matthews or Tom Phillips or something like that. So my parents are from Turkey, so I put a lot of names there. Like I thought that it would be cool to have the last name Turk, because it's easy to say, it's not like out of place, but it also is sort of a nod to my parents and their homeland. And actually, while I was at WWE, a lot of wrestling fans in Turkey discovered that I had this background. And the segment of fans that I heard from the most by far were the Turkish wrestling fans. I must have gotten like hundreds upon hundreds of messages from, there must have been a message board or something that they were writing about this Turkish guy that happens to be at WWE, and I just got inundated with messages, which I appreciate very much, because I didn't think I even aired in Turkey doing anything. So they just happened to find this online. So anyway, we put this list together, and the international department, which I essentially worked for the most, helped out as well. And as the story goes, I can't confirm this story, but this is how I heard it from a couple people. Apparently, it went to the highest levels, and they looked at the list and basically said, well, we don't like any of these names, but we do like the name Kyle, so let's name him Kyle. And then the first name they came up with was Kyle Richards. And so I got a call from my boss, hey, you're going to be Kyle Richards. Congratulations. Don't change your social media yet, but you can tell your parents and your friends. So I text all my friends, and then I wait a few minutes, and then I get a call back from my boss again, and he says, you're not going to be Kyle Richards. And I said, well, what happened? It was only been 5 minutes. And he said, well, we did a Google search, and apparently Kyle Richards is the name of a real housewife on television. Yeah. So we have to change the name to Kyle Edwards. Okay, fine. So I'm Kyle Edwards now.
All right. That's cool. I don't know, is it just a little odd, though, that they ask, and who aren't like going to be so-called big WD wrestling superstars, to have their names changed? It seems, I don't know, just not as maybe PC, or maybe in the future they wouldn't do it as much. What do you think?
No, I don't know if it's a PC thing at all. I think it's more they own their properties and they own their television, and anybody that appears on their television, they have the discretion to own the name of the person that's on the television as well. Now, they have certain announcers. Scott Stanford is a perfect example. He's been with WWE since 2009, and that is his name. He's also a sports reporter in New York, and he goes by the name Scott Stanford. So I wasn't offended. I knew what I was getting into. I mean, I could have tried to negotiate it, I suppose, but I knew that wasn't a hill I was ready to die on in terms of arguments. So I said, that's fine. I mean, if I move on from WWE one day, I can go back to my name. I still have a name, so it's not like I was concerned at all, you know?
And you've been a part of minority events. I know there was one recently in Toronto. It's hard to see that in certain people. Like when I see you on TV, or when I did even earlier in the years, I wouldn't think of yourself as maybe a minority. And do you find that a lot of people maybe see you as that, or the perception, and what you feel the perception is changing in today's society?
I think that there's more of a conversation being had. I definitely do. I definitely feel like more outlets are at least striving for more equality. And when I say equality, I mean gender equality. I mean representation across religions and races. I feel like that conversation is definitely being had. And I feel like when decisions are being made, particularly for talent, it seems like that is definitely at the forefront. And that's a good thing. There should be a diversity. And I guess that's one of the reasons why I'm really proud to be Canadian, is because growing up, it always felt diverse, especially in Toronto. It feels like a diverse. The way that I describe Toronto to people in the United States is you could find any nationality in Toronto. Yeah. Right? Like you can really find, and you can even find people of different backgrounds blended together in Toronto. It's such a multicultural potpourri of multinational harmony that, I always grew up just accepting every nation and every race and every creed, and that's just the way that it was. And I'm very happy and proud to have grown up that way. So for me, I mean, I'm not going to, sit here and say, I really feel it in America. Like I personally don't, right? I'm not saying that I don't see it. I'm not saying that there isn't. I'm not turning a blind eye to discrimination, but I can only speak from my personal experience. But also, I'm not necessarily, at the highest positions working for, being the top anchor at SportsCenter or something like that yet. So, will that come? I don't know. I have experienced that a few times in my career, yes, but truthfully, I don't dwell on it, and I don't feel like. Listen, I focus on the positives over the negatives. Like that's the way you got to be. Otherwise, it's going to eat you alive. Yeah.
All right. Before we move on from wrestling, is there a guy, do you think, in the background maybe that you feel is maybe undervalued by fans, or somebody behind the scenes that's just a really cool guy or girl on the roster that's nobody talks about as much? Do you think they maybe should be?
Well, on-air talent, there was a lot of them. I felt like, especially when I was at NXT, there was a lot of talent there that really just loved the craft of pro wrestling, and they grew up loving it just like many others did. And so it was always fun to have conversations in that locker room because people really, truly cared. And the vibe was really fun in those locker rooms as well. But I do want to give a shout out to the people behind the scenes, because oftentimes you don't really hear about the producers. You don't really hear about the social media team or the WWE.com writers. That first floor at they call the Titan Towers in Stamford, Connecticut, quote unquote, is a very fun floor to be in. Walking around the writers that are all big fans, and they're really good at writing, and they're good at their job, and they're good at what I liked was the creativity, thinking of very interesting topics to write about. So I wanted to give them a shout out because they don't often get that recognition because, yes, it is all about the superstars. The superstars are the ones that are creating the stories and drawing the crowds and the attention. But it's always nice to give credit where credit is due to the crew behind the scenes because they work very hard. And I will say that since I've left WWE, my closest friends in the company that I still talk to are the ones behind the scenes, my former producers in International and people in .com. So like I feel like they're great people and they're very good at their jobs, and they have a difficult task of taking all of this content and making these superstars look as great as possible.
Mm-hmm. Do a lot of the writers sometimes change up stories at the last second, like even, minutes or days before pay-per-views?
I mean, look, things can change on a dime, and that creative writing position, that is a whole other animal. I mean, that position is a very difficult one. I've often heard that it's a thankless job. I've often heard that you get put through the ringer in that job. I wouldn't know because I haven't taken that job, but I will say that from the people that I've talked to who have worked in that writer's room, it can be extremely rewarding, but it can also be extremely difficult. And so for those that have lasted in that room for upwards of 5, 10, even 15 years, that's a testament to them because that is a difficult room to work in. So I've heard.
All right. So you've had a lot of different roles in your career, and, but there's one really, really cool one. And damn
Only one?
Arda. Damn you. This is probably one of the ones that I wish I had, and that was doing the play-by-play for EA Sports, NHL Gaming, EA SHL stuff. This is amazing. This is classic. It's original. It's badass. How did you get this job, Arda? This is amazing.
So I'm a lifelong video game fan.
Yeah.
I'm all the way back to the Nintendo. That's how old I am. The original NES. Love it. Still play it. I'm a big retro gaming guy. I get booked at conventions now to do moderating panels and things like that. Actually, this past weekend, I just did commentary for a classic Tetris championship, which was wild. And this weekend, you might appreciate this as well. Yeah. In Vancouver, I'll be doing commentary for the World NHL 94 Championships.
Oh, nice. Yes. I've been hearing bars and places have been doing these kind of tournaments for a while too now.
Yes.
So it's pretty cool.
Buddy, you got to go to retro conventions because these kind of tournaments happen all the time. And so in Vancouver this weekend, give the date just in case people are listening to this after the fact. Yeah. But it will be Sunday, October 28th. It'll be in Richmond, British Columbia, and it's the World King of 94. It's the World NHL 94 Championships. So that's how I actually got discovered by the NHL. Wow. Because I did it last year. They held it in Las Vegas. So I did the commentary there. And I also had been doing some video game things separately and also hockey. So at the time, I was hosting the MSG Hockey Show on MSG Networks and doing some stuff with the New Jersey Devils on their game broadcasts as well. And the NHL just announced that they had decided to put on this esports tournament called the NHL Gaming Championships. And my agent at the time just reached out and then it just from there they said, yeah, we know this guy, so let's at least have a phone call with him. And so I had a phone call with a bunch of people. It was people from the NHL and people from the gaming side, people from EA. It was just a big conference call. And I left an impression, I guess, and they decided to bring me on board. And I was ecstatic. It was like, all this time I thought WWE would be my dream come true. Yeah. And honestly, when I got this assignment, I was like, man, if this was a full-time thing, I would just ride it for the rest of my career because it blends the two things I love the most, video games and sports, particularly hockey. And so it's just like, how can you get any better than this? And then I get to travel on top of that. I'm not too far. I'm not gone too much from my wife. I'm traveling, on a weekend basis, but I get to go to places I've never been. Like we went to Stockholm this year. I'd never been to Scandinavia before. Yeah. Doing it was terrific. I met a lot of fantastic people. Everything that I'm hearing says that it'll be back again this year, and I can't wait to be a part of it because it was so much fun, man. It was so much fun. And the Toronto, like I have to say, the studio, it was in the CBC studios,
Yep.
I guess the whole Rogers CBC.
Up there.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just, it was awesome. It was such a great vibe, such a great studio. And then I saw some of my old, just bringing it back, closing the loop on the Score. There's so many Score people that had moved on to Rogers and are still there. So I saw so many familiar faces. And then when we came to Toronto at the CBC studios, it was like a high school reunion because I saw so many faces that I'd worked with at the Score who are now working for Rogers and CBC. Yeah. So it was really cool to be a part of that environment.
Amazing. So is that like, you've held all these titles now already you're still such a young career. Is that your maybe your most valued title that you've held so far, and which position or job have you had so far that you really thought was really, it went off the charts, even higher than you thought it would be?
This one was definitely that. It's been among a career highlight for me for sure. And what I realized is, I've been doing broadcasting for so many years now, and I've done a lot of different jobs and a lot of different sports and a lot of different content. I mean, I've done everything from being a Toronto talk show host to being a live weather reporter in deadly storms, to working with video games and working in sports, doing football analysis and doing hockey coverage. For me, I think a situation that would make me really happy is if I was the host of an NHL team broadcast. I would love to do something like that if I was the host of the Rangers or if I was the host of the Leafs or something like that. Just pick a team, whatever their regional broadcast is, or even a national broadcast, whatever it is. I think I would be really happy doing that, no matter which team. I would love to find a team that I could be that I could host, and then on the side, doing a lot of these expos and video game tournaments. Esports is something that I'm really diving into and I'm really enjoying a lot. And I feel like in my career, you should definitely be ambitious. I feel like I'd like to enjoy both. I feel like I'm really close to something like that, and I would definitely enjoy it. And I feel like I would just have a blast. And so you got to love what you do. And if you feel like if something is missing in your life or your career, you got to go for it. And so I'm not saying anything's missing in mine. I'm just saying I think that would be the ultimate arrangement. And things are going well. A lot of esports on my plate lately. And I would love to, unfortunately the hockey show didn't come back this season. Okay. That doesn't mean I won't be doing things with MSG, but now it gives me the opportunity to find more things, to see what else is out there for me. And so you just never lose hope. And so, that's the way it is.
Cool. You did mention the hockey show. It's on the MSG Network, so that incorporates all of New York Islanders, New York Rangers, New Jersey Devils. Is that maybe where it's maybe at fault in terms of I don't get to watch much of it because I'm here in Canada, but you don't get to focus on one team. Are you talking about a little bit of all three teams, and then it doesn't work for fans because if there's a lot of hatred between the different teams, how can you focus well on the one show?
So that show focused on general hockey topics. Definitely not the three teams. Okay. The four teams, actually, including the Sabres, because the Sabres are also on MSG, yes, okay. But up in Buffalo, of course. So that show was definitely general topics. Like right now, an example topic would be Crosby and McDavid faced off for the first game this season, and Crosby scored a ridiculous overtime winner, but Crosby says that McDavid's the best player in the league right now. Who do we think is the best player in the league right now? So that would be an example topic.
Yeah. All right.
And things like that. So it's very general topics. It's not talking about the Rangers' fourth line or the Devils' power play or young players or the Islanders and the arena situation. We're not talking about that. We weren't talking about that on the hockey show. We were talking very much about overall hockey topics that we felt like hockey fans would be discussing among their friends. So it was a great time. I enjoyed it a lot. We did 2 seasons of it, and I made a lot of great contacts from it. I made a lot of great friends. The content was a lot of fun. We were allowed to have a lot of fun on that show, and I did. We did. So I'm glad that it lasted. Nothing lasts forever, and I'm glad that I was able to be a part of that. And from that, I was able to do a lot of cool things with MSG Networks. One season, I hosted the entire Rangers playoff run,
nice.
Which was a lot of fun. They had a whole activation outside MSG. That was a lot of fun. And then the year after that, I moved over to the Devils, doing a lot of work there with the team and also with MSG Networks on their broadcasts and also in arena and things like that. So there was a lot of work that I did there that I'm very proud of. And so. It was great, and I'll be continuing to do some work with MSG this year, just not on the hockey show.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, I kept the mug, so at least I have that.
So you're still doing some Devils. How do you think the Devils are going in the future? Who's in their core and move forward for the future?
Yeah, I should mention everything is to be determined in terms of hockey for me right now. Yeah. And it will be I'll have announcements soon. I just have nothing for you right now in terms of my future in hockey. But regarding the Devils, I do still follow hockey. I still do follow, especially the local teams, all four of them, well, three of them. Yeah. And regarding the Devils, there's a lot of optimism in that locker room right now. Their motto is, "We're building a brotherhood, not a neighborhood." That started last season, and there's been a lot of character realignment in that locker room because there was years upon years of missing the playoffs, being a basement team, and a lot of personnel change. And really, it started with getting the first overall pick and Nico Hischier. Mm-hmm. And really, pretty much all the young players, for all intents and purposes, that were in the lineup last season performed very well. Will Butcher immediately became a quarterback on the power play. Jesper Bratt was performing like a 210-pound player, protecting the puck, especially in the first half of the season. Keith Kincaid really became between the pipes when Corey Schneider went down to injury, and he's still exhibiting that this season as well. I mean, you're seeing him become an elite goaltender right before our eyes. The young players, Will Butcher, Jesper Bratt, Nico Hischier, and even though I wouldn't consider him a young rookie player, of course, Keith Kincaid between the pipes. I mean, he's been spectacular, especially that month and a half where he really dragged the team on his back towards the finish line. The team had been performing so well in the first half of the year, and then Keith Kincaid really solidified that playoff spot. And, of course, off the back of Taylor Hall as well, the Hart Trophy winner. So there's a lot of eyes on the Devils right now. It's no longer about pressing the reset button. Now it's about improving for that team. And so when you have a couple of new faces in the lineup, Dea is there now, and John Quenneville looks like he's finally getting a serious look. He's been with the team a few times before. He's been up and down in the AHL and NHL. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's a character player. He's the kind of guy that you love having around because he's got a personality and he loves to talk on the ice during practice. He's just a fun-loving guy, and he adds that personality that sometimes you need. Sometimes you need that in the locker room, right? Like just somebody who really perks people up, and John Quenneville seems to be one of those guys, and definitely, Keith Kincaid. There's a lot of good people in that locker room. From being around that team last season especially, there's a lot of people who are good people. They've got good personalities. A lot of them have good senses of humor. Keith Kincaid's a really funny guy. So there's a lot of that there as well. And they seem to be gelling well. They seem to be buying into the premise that they're building a brotherhood, not a neighborhood. They're really believing in that, and they're really feeling like there's something special to be had. And it just shows. I mean, the first few games of the season, they really performed well, and the bonding continued when they did the global series, when they went to Switzerland and played a exhibition game, and then they went to Sweden and had a great first game of the season. So that momentum seems to be continuing.
Yeah, you mentioned pretty much a lot of the good core young guys on the Devils, and even Pavel Zacha and the rest of them. I did pick them actually to contend for a playoff spot, and I do feel that they're probably going to get one for the playoffs this year.
Well, there's a thing. I believe, I don't know the date exactly, but I remember last season around February or March when the fates of the Rangers and the Islanders were pretty much set that they wouldn't be making the playoffs. I think a beat writer or someone, I forget who it was, someone mentioned that it hasn't been since it was either the 70s or somewhere that at least one of the local New York teams did not make the playoffs.
Wow.
So, like, it was somewhere in the 70s, I believe, like the low 1970s. But since that year, every single year, at least one of the Rangers, Devils, and Islanders, when they existed, made the playoffs. And last year, if the Devils had not made the playoffs, it would have been the first year that they hadn't. Now, this year, it looks like that situation could find, again, if we're in rebuilding years for teams like the Islanders and the Rangers, and if the Devils are once again a bubble team battling for a playoff spot, you could see that situation rise again. But I do feel like the Rangers, I feel like, are going to impress people with their young players. I feel like there's going to be I feel like a lot of critics have already written them off, but I feel like there might be some heads turned, especially as we go along in the season. It's very possible for the Rangers team. With the Islanders, of course, they're going to cope with the loss of Tavares and you know, the arena back and forth. But I think that might be a good thing, to be honest with you, because Nassau Coliseum was always the heart of the Islanders, and that would be a good transition to go to Belmont Park once that gets finalized. So there is still some optimism to be had. In talking with Rangers and Islanders people, you know, there's still optimism despite some of the many what people might perceive to be negatives. There's still some optimism to hold on to.
All right. Before we leave, Arda, are you finally going to stay somewhere long enough than a few months?
I hope so. I really hope so. I mean, look, at the end of the day, I continue to enjoy what I'm doing. That's the life of a freelancer, man. Like, sometimes, you know, especially in media, it's difficult to find long-term jobs, and that's just the way that it is. And so until the time comes that some outlet decides, you know what, we're going to offer you a lifetime contract, I guess we're going to keep plugging away, my friend.
Well, is there somewhere in the near future we might see you even different in a different role again?
Well, I'll say this. There are a couple of things on my plate, like the Gaming Championships is one example where I'm back there for a second year, assuming all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. Nice. I have been doing a couple of gigs under the radar. I tweet about them, but they're not my most high-profile gigs. But I have been doing them for several years. I do a weekly sports segment, for example, for a sports channel overseas, TRT World, and I've been doing that for 4 years. So I guess you could say that is among my longest standing jobs, you know, talking about North American sports. But listen, I have a feeling that in the next 6 months or so, something maybe more permanent will come up, or at least I'll have some fun announcements to make. And hey, life is nothing if not exciting, right, my friend?
Oh, yes, it sure is. I'm just teasing. All right, Arda, thank you for coming on the show. You've been a great guest, and it's been a joy. If you couldn't tell from my voice that I've been a fan of yours for a long time, and I'm glad that you got to come on my show.
Oh, absolutely. Continued success with your podcast, and thank you very much for having me on.
Time for this week's Team ISO, and of course it's where we specifically isolate and talk about one team, and we go into the blogospheres and we get a better view of what's going on with that specific team. This week we are Team ISOing the Arizona Coyotes, and we're bringing back Louis Pannone, and of course you can follow him on Twitter at Louis Pannone. That's LouisPannone, and of course he covers the Yotes for the Hockey Writer. And welcome to the show, Louis.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right, let's get right into it. It's been a bit of a struggle so far in the season, but as you were saying before we started recording, a huge hat trick by Christian Fischer last game.
Absolutely. He's been a player kind of lying in the weeds a little bit the last couple of years. Hasn't really done too much, but he was pretty hyped up when they first drafted him. He had a really good career in junior, and it's taken him a little bit of time to get going in the NHL. It was really good in the AHL down with the Tucson Roadrunners, but this might be the year for him to take that step forward and really become a top 6 contributor this year. As you said, he had that hat trick against Columbus yesterday, really put the dagger in with those 2 late goals. So he's definitely been a key player this year so far.
You think the guys are a little bit slow out of the gate? It looked like OEL wasn't too good in the first few games. Maybe he's getting a little bit into the games as well. Same thing with Keller. I got him. I drafted him on my fantasy team, and I was like, oh, maybe he's not doing so well. But it looks like he's picking it up as well.
Yeah, I think it was just a little team-wide thing that was going on at the beginning of the season. Like, they were struggling offensively. They were struggling to score goals. They were generating a ton of shots. They're not allowing too many shots against. So they were, you expect them to do better than they did the first couple of games. But unfortunately, they got shut out 3 of those first 4 games. But like you said, OEL got off to a little bit of a slow start. Keller got off to a little bit of a slow start. But they've really picked it up here in the last week or so. They're moving forward, and they're scoring goals finally, and hopefully they can keep it going.
The team was lacking offense, but it looks like between the pipes, both goalies aren't doing, too shabby, actually. I think Ronta's goals against average and save percentage aren't that bad. It's just that the team has been losing when he's been between the pipes. And the backup, which is Kumper, right? He's looked even better.
Yeah, he played last night. I think Ronta was a little under the weather a little bit. So Kemper played last night and only gave up 1 goal, which was on the first shift of the game. And it was like kind of a deflection, some sort of fluke goal thing. So he played outstanding yesterday. He was good in his other start too. Didn't get the win. Didn't get any offensive support. But he's been solid. And like you said, Antti Ronta has been one of the best goaltenders in the NHL probably since about February last season. He was all right before that, but he really turned the corner last season in February. Was one of the best goaltenders in the NHL down the stretch last year. He's really picked up where he left off this year too. He's been outstanding.
All right, we should talk about the big transactions they did over the summer. Bit of a list here. So of course they locked up, which is a little interesting in my opinion, Christian Dvorak. He hasn't really even finished his entry level, hasn't, played a couple of seasons here, but he's still got 1 more year left on his entry level. And then they've already locked him up now for 6 years at roughly $4.4 million.
I think that was a little bit of an interesting contract, like you said, a little bit of an eyebrow raiser. Like you said, he hasn't really done too much so far in his career, maybe 35, 36 points in his first 2 years each year. So a little bit interesting to see them lock him up for such a long contract with kind of a relatively unproven record. But I think he does have the potential to be a pretty solid center. He was really good in junior, played with Max Domi on the London Knights. He was a solid player in junior, solid player so far with the Coyotes, but he really needs to get past that 40-point, 50-point plateau to really prove that he's worth that money. They really didn't have to do that. I would, just in my opinion. I don't think they had to worry about anybody signing an offer sheet for him, so I'm not sure why they gave him the 6-year contract, but it could work out. He could mature into an outstanding player, and that could be a bargain down the line. But this year he did suffer an injury, and it could cost him the season, unfortunately. Depends on his health and how fast he heals, but he did suffer a upper body injury, and he might be out for the season, unfortunately. So that would take care of the last year of the entry-level contract like you're talking about. So I guess we'll see what happens next year if he's not able to come back this year.
Yeah, it seems a bit of an odd contract. I believe it's Vegas also signed, was it Alex Tuck to like a long-term contract? I believe it was him.
I think so. And they gave Ryan Reeves a ton of money too, which was also surprising.
Yeah, but a bit of like an entry guy, and he still hasn't fully proven himself, but you've already given him the long-term contract and a fair bit of cash value, or cap hit at least, for the team management-wise for that type of player. And then it's going to be even odder since he might not even play the whole season with you were saying the upper body, which seems like it's the torn pectoral muscles. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah,
go ahead.
They tried something similar with Connor Murphy a couple of years ago. They gave him a pretty huge contract after just 2 or 3 years in the league, and they moved on from him just like 2 years into that contract. So that one didn't work out, but we'll see what happens with Dvorak. Hopefully it'll be a right move, be the good move for John Chayka.
Yeah. Well, it's worked well for many London Knights in the NHL. Alumni guys. All right. So then in June, a big trade is Galchenyuk goes for Max Domi. Another guy who has started the season injured, so it's tough to tell how the trade's working out already. Domi does seem like he's fitting better into maybe an original six Canadian franchise. Maybe his dad seems like he's loving it. But what do you see in terms of Galchenyuk fitting in the lineup? And, of course, he did play last game, finally.
I think that Galchenyuk pickup was a good move. Actually, a good move for both players. Both guys kind of needed a fresh start. Domi really hit a wall after his rookie year, struggled with some injuries, and didn't really produce last year. So I think it's nice for him to get a fresh start in Montreal, and he's been outstanding. Like you said, he's been really good to start the year. As far as Galchenyuk goes, I think he also needed to get out of Montreal, just really needed to get a new start somewhere. And I think it'll work in his favor. The Coyotes are planning on using him as a center this year, which I guess Montreal wasn't really doing. They were playing him as a wing, which isn't really his natural position. So I think going back to center will help him out this year. I think playing alongside maybe Clayton Keller or someone like that will help him out, get him some goals and some assists. So I think he'll be a good pickup this year for the Coyotes. Like you said, he was injured to start the year. He did play, I think, one preseason game before he was hurt, and he scored twice in that game. So he was good during the preseason, but we'll see if he can come back and get his legs back under him and make a contribution here in the early going in the season.
Yeah, I enjoyed watching him when he played for Sarnia. I watched a couple of his games when he came down to Mississauga and Brampton. So he looked really good, and it's a tough comparison now, but he looked a lot better at that time than Yakupov because they were playing together then. All right. Then on July 1st, the Coyotes re-upped and gave a nice big contract to OEL, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, $8.2 million for 8 years. Nicholas Clamerson, $5 million for 2 years. And these are both, again, contracts that start next season. And then also they got free agent Michael Grabner, $3.3 million for 3 years. And that's another iffy one because Grabner, he's a guy that just usually finds his legs. And once he gets that going, he's faster than most guys on the ice, and he gets a lot of opportunities there. I know when he played in Toronto, he got those opportunities and he didn't finish. But then when he played with the Rangers, it seemed to click. How's it going so far?
He's been all right so far. He had a shorthanded assist, actually, in the third game of the season. So, like you said, he used that speed and got up the ice with, I think it was Brad Richardson, and set him up with a one-timer for a shorthanded goal. So we've seen a flash so far, but we really haven't seen anything sustained out of Grabner so far. But the good news is the Coyotes did get him on a pretty good bargain. I think they're only paying him like $3.3 million per year for the next 3 years. So kind of a low-risk contract. He did score 27 goals during each of the last 2 seasons, so he's got some potential to put the puck in the net, but really doesn't bring too much from an assist standpoint. But he should be able to score some goals once he gets his legs under him a little bit.
So we mentioned OEL. He's captain now?
That's correct. He is.
And is it nice to lock up, in my opinion, one of the more overall versatile defensemen and best in the entire NHL?
Absolutely. I've been saying that for the last couple of years, that if he was on like Toronto or Montreal or a team in a bigger market, he'd probably already have a Norris Trophy. He's been that good for the Coyotes the last couple of years. Like you said, he does it all. He plays on the power play. He kills penalties. He plays probably 25, 26, 27 minutes a night. So there's not really anything that he struggles at. He does everything pretty well. So it's good to lock him up. There were some rumors that they were going to try to trade him or try to move him, but it was their goal all along to keep him in Arizona and have him be the franchise cornerstone going forward, and that's what they were able to do.
That's good. I'm glad he stayed. They need a good cornerstone leader and good solid player back there. All right, so Galchenyuk goes into the lineup. How do you think the roster is going to fit and where players are going to sit? How are they sitting right now, and what do you think for the whole season?
It seems like Rick Tocchet's really been juggling his lines a little bit to start the season, and you can kind of understand why. They were shut out in 3 of the first 4 games, like we talked about earlier. So been struggling to kind of find that chemistry, find that rhythm. But they were using Derek Stepan and Christian Fisher together on a line on yesterday night, and that worked out really well with the hat trick. So that might be a possibility going forward. I think Galchenyuk is going to slot in as the number one center. I would assume he's going to play with Clayton Keller, maybe Michael Grabner, Brendan Perlini on the other wing. So that should be a pretty potent top line once everyone gets going, everyone stays healthy. So he should be a nice addition to the lineup. Like we mentioned, Derek Stepan and Christian Fisher down on the second line. Dylan Strome has been off to a good start this year. I think he has 2 goals, both in the power play. So he's been showing a little bit of production this year after struggling to kind of make an impact in his first couple of years. So it's nice to see him show what he can do finally. That high draft pick in the year that McDavid and Eichel went 1-2. So it's nice to see Dylan Strome, who was selected third that year, finally make an impact in the NHL. So there's your third line center, Dylan Strome. And got Lawson Krause up this year from Tucson. Scored a goal in Chicago, I think, the other night. Nice one-timer. So he's been showing a little bit of potential. So there's a lot of young guys in that group. Brendan Perlini also scored a goal I think against Winnipeg on Saturday. So there's a lot of young players there. I think the season's really going to hinge on whether they can take that next step forward in their development. If they can get some young guys to score 20, 25 goals, 50 points, 55 points, they should be all right. But if the young guys struggle, it's going to be maybe another year without the playoffs here in Arizona.
Outside of Clayton Keller, who do you think is out of these, maybe some of the guys that you mentioned, right? Krause, Strome, who's going to be that breakout player this year, do you feel?
I would probably venture a guess and say Brendan Perlini. He's really been showing flashes. He scored 17 goals last year and missed some time due to injury as well. So 17 goals and limited action. Probably would have had 20 if he was healthy the whole season. So this year is going to be a big year for him. It's his last year of his entry-level contract. So he's playing for maybe that Dvorak contract next year if he can maybe score 25 goals. He can get that contract. So he'll definitely be a player to keep an eye on this year. He's got a wicked wrist shot, big body. Plays hard, plays physical in the offensive zone. I think he really has the potential to be a solid power forward in the NHL. Kind of like Shane Doan was here. Just score 20, 25 goals, 50 points, 55 points, and play hard, play physical, and be a presence. I think he has the potential to be that kind of player.
Nice. So it could be a tough year, but at least it does seem like it's going to be very exciting with those young, fast, offensively skilled kids now in the roster. Where do you think they will end up at the end of the season? Are they still maybe a bottom 5 team? Are they a 5-10? Or are they just outside of maybe the bubble or getting inside of a playoff spot?
I'd say that they can challenge for a playoff spot this year. Out in the Pacific, it's kind of weak this year. The Kings are really down this year. The Ducks are looking a little sluggish. Lately, they're getting outshot, I think, 15 shots a night average so far. So the Ducks are struggling. The Sharks are always going to be tough, especially with the Erik Karlsson pickup. Vegas is looking like they're getting their legs back under him. So, but outside of San Jose and Vegas, there's not really too many teams that have stood out in the Pacific so far. Vancouver's hanging around, Calgary's hanging around, Edmonton's hanging around, but I think the Coyotes have a really good chance to make the playoffs this year. Their possession numbers have been way up this year. Their shots allowed are way down. Their scoring is coming around. So, if they can keep it going, they might be able to make the playoffs this year. I think I could be wrong, but I think their Corsi is the 4th best in the league right now. So, wow. They're possessing the puck really well. They're getting shots on goal. They're limiting the opposition shots. So if they can keep that going and score some goals, not get shut out like they did in the beginning of the season, they might be all right. Might be in the 90 to 95 point range and have a chance to make the playoffs.
Wow. Sounds good. Sounds exciting. All right. Before you go, Lewis, who's a prospect or two do you think that will come into the roster in the next 2-3 years who could really make an impact?
Probably the first guy that comes to mind is Pierre-Olivier Joseph. He was their first-round pick last year. Was one of the last cuts this year. Sent him back to junior. So he's definitely a guy to keep an eye on in the future. The Coyotes are kind of aging on that blue line. They got Alex Goligoski's probably past his prime. Nicholas Hjalmarsson's past his prime maybe. Struggled with injuries last year. I got Jason Demers is maybe a little past his prime. So there's going to be some openings on that blue line in the next couple of years, and I think Pierre-Olivier Joseph will definitely be a guy to keep an eye on. The second guy to keep an eye on would probably be Nick Merkley. We've been talking about him for a couple of years now, but he's really struggled to stay on the ice. Tore his ACL in junior. I think the year after he was drafted. Struggled with injuries last year in Tucson. Got shut down in, I think, February. So But he's got some talent. He played with Dylan Strome a lot last year, played with Lawson Krause a lot last year, put up some solid numbers. But if he can just stay healthy, I think he'll be in the NHL by season's end here. So Nick Merkley and Pierre-Lele Joseph, 2 guys to keep an eye on in Arizona.
All right. Lewis, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
That's it for this week's Jablam Hockey. Again, remember, please go on our website, jablamhockey.com. Follow us on Twitter at Russian98 or at Jablam Hockey. Tweet us if you have any questions. If you have any comments, you can tweet us. You can go to our website at jablamhockey.com. You can check out all the stuff we talked about, our trending now topics, our cool costumes, our interviews with Arda Ocal and Louis Pannone. If you have any questions for them, you can go on our website. You can leave comments at the end of the page. And please go on iTunes or Stitcher or any other podcast place you go to and subscribe to us. And you can rate and review us on there. Please do so. And soon enough, we'll have mailing list on our website. And we'll be giving prizes as soon as next week. Hopefully next week I have some time to give you some Leafs talk and talk about a little bit junior hockey. And we're going to probably name the Junior Hockey Player of the Month for Jablam Hockey. Till next week, see you, everybody.